Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening for the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association's webinar about controller audits. And we thank you for all those that registered and are taking the time this evening. We also know a lot of folks registered and will be watching this presentation at their leisure as we are recording this presentation, and we will send it out to everybody who has registered so that they could see it later on. So thank you again for joining us. And people will be joining us throughout the presentation. But I want to thank our officers for the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association, several who are on this evening, as well as our executive committee members and the board in-service committee, who has taken the time to help with our programming that we are bringing to you this year. This is our first online webinar for the season, but it is a continuation of our fiscal governance series, and it's about controller audits and what to expect and what the expectations from the controller's office is of the board members' roles during the audit and what they're looking for this year with regards to your knowledge and oversight. And we are pleased to be joined with a member of the team from the New York State Comptroller's Office. But I also want to thank Ms. Lorraine Mentz, the Administrative Director for the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association. She's the one who works diligently with your district clerks in helping set up and coordinate and registrations and links. So you see Lorraine off there in the corner. So be sure to just I just wanted to pass along my thanks for her assistance in making all this happen as well. And you had an opportunity on the previous slides to see about some of the upcoming events that we're going to have in the remainder of the year. They're also on our website, nssba.org. Be sure to check it out. We've got some exciting events coming up in the next couple of months, and we hope to see you there. And before we get started, we also want to take this opportunity to wish all of you and your families a very healthy and happy holiday season. We certainly are grateful for all of you, and we thank you for your support of our association and your participation in our events. At this time, I want to welcome aboard Mr. Ira McCracken from the New York State Comptroller's Office. Ira is the Chief Municipal Auditor for the Long Island region of the New York State Comptroller's Office. He oversees the teams that go out and actually do the physical audits. And I will tell you from a personal standpoint, I met Ira, it was almost 20 years ago that you and I first met. Yep. I was a board member at William Floyd for 18 years, and about 60 days after I got on the board, we found out that we had a employee steal from our district, and then one thing led to another, and we had some other issues and some problems. So me and Ira met during a very tough, painful time for our district, because lo and behold, the Comptroller's Office came in and said, okay, we're doing an audit of William Floyd. Rosalind was already in the news, and sooner than later, we were all over the news as well. And I will tell you that, it wasn't a pleasant experience. And but what I will say is I was in healthcare accounting for over 30 years, and I was used to dealing with state auditors from either the Attorney General's office, Office of Medicaid Inspector General. And one thing I learned very early on when you're going through an audit, try to be professional and respectful of the auditors in the field who come and do the work because they have a job to do. It's always better to be professional and try to be cooperative and collaborative as opposed to combative, because combative will never work in your favor, and they have a job to do, and I'm going to say something as an analogy that I shared with Ira when we were planning for this. It's almost like a root canal. Nobody wants to get one. When you get one, it's painful. You got to go through the process and the procedure so that you're better off at the end of the day and the pain goes away, hopefully. So a controller's audit is almost like a root canal, right? So what a setup for you, Ira, a root canal going through.
Yeah, that's something. I say. Yeah,
but
I mean,
what I will say is the auditor's reports at the end of the day, the tone and tenor of controller reports today are very, very different than they were back in 2004 and 2005 when I first experienced them. Some of the reports, and Ira had no control over the editorial content. Some of the reports were written for headlines back then. Nowadays, it's just more about reporting the findings in a very straightforward way, and Newsday is going to portray it any which way they're going to portray it. But these folks, they just come out and do their job as board members it is our responsibility. And as members of the governance team, it is our responsibility to be good stewards and fiduciaries of our districts because we're entrusted with a lot of taxpayer dollars and resources. And this is part of the oversight process, trust and verify. And this is one of those necessary evils that you have an outside agency that comes in and takes a look at how you're doing things, what you're doing, and then they make recommendations based on from their perspective, based in regulation. Back in the day, sometimes things were being written into reports that weren't even based in regulation, but that's changed over the years too. And they're going to give you their best practices and recommendations, and then you have an opportunity to respond. But anyway, without any further ado, as time has gone on since that very first audit in 2004, Ira and his team came back a couple of times at our home district, and our relationship became very collaborative. And like I said, I've always found Mr. McCracken to be a very straight up, honest, dedicated, passionate public servant, and was always honest, and again, always taking a high road and never getting rattled and never confrontational. So for that, Ira, I do appreciate the work that you do. And without any further ado, sir, we're going to turn it over to you so that you can tell us all about the controller's audit and the expectations that you, from your perspective, that you expect from a governance team. So it's all yours, sir.
Gotcha. Well, thanks, Bob. That's an incredible introduction you gave me there. I appreciate that. And what I can definitely say about Bob too is, the way he's working with, your group and organization right now is how he was working when we first met. And it was definitely, tough times, like he said, everything going on with Roslyn School District, and then him coming on to the William Floyd board. And he was always straightforward and cool about everything. And he has some board members that were kind of tough, but Bob kind of said, like, hey, hold on, listen what they have to say. And then we can have a conversation about, which is always great. So thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. And wait a minute. So Bob, you mean auditors and auditees can actually be friends? God, that's something.
Certainly friends. I mean, we don't go to vacations or go out to dinner, but yes, you could have a friendly, cooperative relationship. Absolutely. And the one last thing I'll mention, folks, the Q&A box is open. If during the presentation you have questions for Ira, put in your question there. We are monitoring the Q&A box, and we will make sure that your question gets asked of Ira during the process. So feel free to put your questions into that Q&A dialogue box there, and we will try to address your questions as we go along, and then there'll be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end as well. So, all right, Ira, it's all yours.
Yeah, Bob, but also I got a quick little story because, a few years ago when my daughter was in high school, she was part of the Gifted and Talented program, and they did like a little field trip to your radio station. Right. And then all of a sudden we ran each other because it's been a while since we saw each other. We looked at each other, oh my goodness, hugged each other, stuff like that. And my daughter looked at me and said, okay. Later on the way home, she's like, you knew him? I said, yeah. So you made me cool. I appreciate that. So salute to you, man. Thank you very much.
All right. I don't make myself cool, that's for sure. So we appreciate you. And yes, that's the radio show called Spotlight on Long Island Schools, Ira, and it still goes on. Still telling people all the great things that are going on in our district. So
cool. Gotcha. All right, so I guess we get ready to roll on. Let's go to the next one. Let's get it started if you're ready to roll down. So I'm not gonna go crazy, trying to, read all the slides to you and stuff like that, but you guys see what our mission is. But as you can see, we're not just an audit shop. We do risk assessments, we do budget reviews, we review tax cap, and possible, some consolidations when it comes to tax cap, or if like a village or something or a school district may dissolve, we look at that and make sure the information is correct. Training like you're doing right now, we provide that as well. And we have a lot of information on our website, or if you contact us, whether our legal division or any of our other annual financial update and things like that. We have a lot of information that's out there. If I can't get you the information, somebody I'm sure in our division or region can.
And that's another important point. You guys are there as technical resource information. I know when we had questions about would it be permissible to retire debt early and how that would work and the right way to handle it, I know we reached out to you guys to provide us with some technical assistance too.
Correct. So as you can see, that's our authority. Hey, I'm not an attorney, but you can contact our attorneys if somebody says, "Hey, what gives you the authority to audit us?" This is what gives us that authority. Just so you know. Next one, Bob. So, the question comes up, why do an audit? As you can see, meet legal requirements, provide oversight, ensure proper handling of public monies, identify improvements for opportunities, and inform to express concerns. The big thing that, we like to see as far as controls officers, our audits try to identify improvements opportunities. As Bob said, I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. We're trying to help, make sure that taxpayer money is being spent correctly. So that's why we want to get together and kind of work as much as we can with you to make sure that you run it as efficiently as possible. Next one. So we're looking at different types of audits. The performance audits, of course, and then the financial statement audits. You guys are probably more used to, of course, the financial statement audits. It's usually your external auditors and CPAs coming in there, looking at the books at the end of the year. They issue a financial report. As far as we're concerned, our audits are performance audits, and they're based on the 5 conditions: criteria, condition, cause, effect, and then a recommendation. So we'll say, hey, criteria is what should be happening, right? So that would be a law, GML 103, GML 104, your rules and regulations at the district. That's what should be happening. Then we'll look and see what actually is happening. So we're comparing what, the criteria is, what exactly is going on in your respective districts.
And
So
GML stands for General Municipal Law, and there's a
yes, thank you
number,
very
and
much.
it's rooted in regulation, just in case
Yes,
it
yes,
doesn't have to do with GTL or
right.
down on the
Yep.
Jersey Shore. GML, General Municipal Law.
And sometimes we also use the criteria also as, it might be best practices. There might be certain things that are not written in law or even your policies and procedures that might use as criteria. But then we look at, what is the effect? So what happens if you're not doing what the criteria says? And then we say, okay, we'll ask the question is, okay, so why is that happening? So what we've been doing, especially with more recently with the performance audits, is trying to get to the bottom of things. So we'll probably be asking board members and various employees, why is this? What's going on? So we might keep asking the word why. It's almost like we're kids now. We have to be like 5-year-olds and to get to the root cause, because this way, that's how we come up with our recommendation. So maybe that recommendation could be able to help you um, better off with your operations. Next one. Performance audits. I don't want to read this to you. You guys can read that in your, it's a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo, but that's what performance audits, are supposed to do. I'm really not keen on the way they have these things in order anyway at the slideshow, but that's, the training unit. So go on to
And
the
the
next one,
slide
sir.
deck is available on our website for you to download
Yes.
and read at your leisure.
So when we're looking at the types of performance audits, we have program effectiveness, economy and efficiency, internal control, compliance, or providing prospective analysis. As you know from us, our performance sources usually have to do with internal controls. You guys hear internal controls all the time. I'm sure you've heard ad nauseum by now. But what we're doing is asking questions and we're trying to find out what the internal controls are or what the lack thereof. And that's when we come up with our performance audit. The next one.
Okay, and before we go to next slide, you already have a question,
Ah,
Ira.
cool.
Term of a contract with a vendor is 1 year term of board, correct? Can a contract be 3 years if subject to termination after 1 year? What contracts can exceed 1 year? I know we're getting into some specifics, and some
Well,
of it may be more on the legal side
yeah,
than
that
the
sounds
controller
more like a
audit
legal.
guidance side.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good question. I will jot that down. But I think there. I mean, I guess it probably depends. But there are various contracts that can be more than 1 year. I'm not exactly sure the specifics of which ones per se, but that is a good question.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. We will follow up
Yeah,
with
we'll
that
follow up with that.
at a later date. But there are plenty of contracts that are multi-year contracts,
Absolutely
which could exceed the governing authority of that board for that particular year. I'm
correct.
thinking a transportation contract is usually a multi-year contract. So therefore, exceeds the authority of the sitting board for one particular year. But
Yeah,
we
even the
will also get in.
superintendent's contract could be what, like 3 to 5 years, right? That's
Correct.
a contract technically too.
A
So
bargaining unit is a contract
bargaining
as
unit.
well, multi-year. So, but I guess it depends on the type of vendors and maybe the dollar amounts or something like that too. So we'll
Right.
clarify that. Great. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Ready
That's good.
ready for
That's
next
good.
slide?
Yes, sir.
There we go.
This is, general applicable standards. So look, we have to have standards, and yeah, we get nothing out of having anything correct in our work papers because we get peer reviewed as well. So we have to make sure that our work papers are correct and they stand on its own. Any normal person should be able to look at our work papers and say, hey, okay, this is how they came to the conclusion. So we're definitely governed by field work standards, general standards, reporting standards to make sure that what we're doing is correct as well.
So who are
Next one.
you peer reviewed by? So essentially the auditor almost gets audited. So
Yes, who
who
audits the
who
auditor?
who
Absolutely.
does the peer review for the state controller's office?
Good question. So actually, so there's two. So we have actually an internal professional standards unit that periodically does basically a peer review on all our audits. They pick like certain sample and they do it. Then every 3 years, because as a matter of fact, all of our audits that are coming out next year will be subject to a peer review in 2025. And that peer review team is usually made up of various auditors from different states. So there might be a team of auditors from like California, Nevada, wherever, and they have come together and they basically just set up shop in our Albany office and say, okay, we need these 15 audits and all the work papers, and we're going to go through them. So yeah, that's who audits us. Again, I don't like the way these slides are, but when you get the love letter or love email from me saying your district has been picked for an audit, there'll be a link to this pamphlet that basically describes understanding the whole audit process.
And
Next
again,
slide.
this is a moment when your business official will start freaking out.
That's
Your
correct.
superintendent is not going to be happy at all because a whole bunch of additional work has just been placed upon them. And usually the end result is spent justifying what shows up in Newsday or what might be coming as far as questions coming from the public after a report is put out. So
And again, Newsday, like Bob said earlier, we have nothing to do with what Newsday says. I mean, we've done plenty of audits where it's a minor little audit, which really minuscule findings, and somehow it ends up in Newsday. So we look at each other like, yo, this actually made it to Newsday. So yeah, we have nothing. It may be a slow, news cycle that week or something or that day, but we have nothing to do with Newsday, says. They read our reports and they pick things out what they want. Other than that, it's usually through our press office. So thank you, Bob, going through this one. So next, we're going to take you for a ride. This is basically the whole audit process. Like I said, we just talked about the notification letter or the love letter that you get from me. So you get the notification letter. Like I said, the business officials and everybody start going crazy, like what's going to happen. We'll contact the business official, whoever, and we'll set up the entrance conference. But as you see that we have the notification, we have the entrance conference, you have the field work, reporting, and then the exit and response. So that's basically the whole cycle of the audit. What we do now is get a little deeper into that.
right.
Next. Yep.
And who is typically seated at the table at an entrance conference, or who do you particularly like to see at the table when you go into a district? You can't
Yep.
dictate who's at the table, but who should be at the table for the
Yeah,
entrance
yeah, yeah.
conference?
You're getting ahead because that's why these slides. I'm not having a good
Oh,
time with
you're
them,
right.
but
Right. So we'll hold
but I
off. You're
could.
right.
But I will tell you what we do like to have is we invite the CEO and the CFO, right? And anybody else. So there might be an instance where you might have the attorney come, but what we do is we invite the CEO and the CFO. So the CEO would be the superintendent of schools. Now, most people and even our staff, it took a while for them to understand that the CFO of a school district is actually not the business official. Why you would think they are? Because local finance law says the board president is actually the CFO of a school district. So if you want to do a little trivia with your friends, let them know that.
That's why the board president is signing all those contracts.
There you go. Well done.
That's
Exactly.
why they get paid the big bucks compared to the other board members too,
Right.
which is still zero, by the way, for those.
You know how that goes. So with the notification coming to you, a lot of times they say, well, why us? Right. So number one, you know by now, most people know by now, we have a school district cycle. It's usually 5 to 7 years. All school districts from here to Buffalo should be audited over a 5 to 7 year period. Number two, it's just a general, what we call a risk assessment process. So we might get Newsday articles. Newsday is our best friend at times. You know how that goes. Internal data, a lot of taxpayer complaints, and maybe the controller might just say, no, you guys are going there and do an audit. So that's why that's pretty much the why.
Right. So it's either routine because your number is up because you haven't been hit within 5 to 7 years. It could be
Correct.
something that is reported in the news that is an item of concern or an item of note, or a local government official is hearing something, reading something, or has a concern about something. They may send a request over to you, or
Right.
like you said, tips from the public
Yeah.
or concerns from the public could also prompt or trigger an audit.
Correct. Or, and again, like you said, I mean, the governing board may, send us email saying, look, we're new here. We think there's some, things that need to be looked at. We like an audit done. So it definitely happens. So when you get ready to start an audit, this is basically a sample list of, the data requests. We don't really ask for all of that stuff, but that could be an example of most of the stuff that we would ask for when we're there. Times have definitely changed. There was a time where all the stuff would be, have copies and stuff like that, waiting for us on day one. Now we actually have a special electronic, system where we can send a lot of stuff electronically, and it's confidential. It's called BizCom that we use. But most of the stuff, like board meeting minutes, we're not going to request that until the day we get there. So we try to do as best we can to minimize the work that your staff has to do. Continue. So as I mentioned with the entrance conference, we invite the CEO and CFO. Of course, the business official, ASB, whatever you want to call them, they're definitely, of course, invited. And anybody else, we have no problem with that. And again, the purpose of the entrance conference is, to have a discussion about the audit process, which is basically what we're doing right now. Like if we were having an entrance conference, this is basically what we're doing. I'm basically just describing the whole audit process from start to finish.
Is
We
this when
talk
you would
about
indicate the particular areas that you're going to be looking at? Because sometimes you cycle through different areas. Sometimes it may be payroll or different account funds. Sometimes it may be cybersecurity or just
right.
risk assessment with your IT. Is this when you identify here are the areas that we're going to be looking at in particular?
Not necessarily. I guess we might have an idea what we want to look at when we come to when we have the entrance conference, because this is like day one, pretty much starting. Okay, we're having a conversation. But what we like to do is, we'll start asking questions sometime after the entrance conference. So we're looking at, you know, purchasing, payroll, retirement, IT, and when we'll start asking questions, during that, and then that's where we kind of decide specifically what we actually want to do. Most of the time, that's what we do. There might be sometimes, like I said, we might have an idea, but we still have to go in and start asking questions first, because we might have an idea, but when we start asking questions, like, what, this doesn't really pan out based on some of the taxpayer complaints, or what happened in Newsday is not necessarily happening now. So we try to take all that stuff into consideration. But of course, this is a time for, the CEO, CFO, anybody to present to us any concerns that they may have. And
Which never happens, by the
which never happened, of course, right?
way. Here's a
Exactly.
question. Here's a good question from our
Yes.
very smart attendees here.
Yes.
Does the controller's office trigger an audit based on an anonymous request or anonymous request, meaning you get something in the mail and somebody's not putting their name to it, and it could just, be totally anonymous. It could be totally off the wall or whatever. Will that initially trigger an audit, just an anonymous request or a series of them?
I love that question. No, it doesn't necessarily trigger an anonymous request. I mean, from an anonymous request, it doesn't trigger an audit. We may use it depending on what it is. You know, like everything else, we have to take things with a grain of salt, because if somebody, an anonymous letter is sent to us and says, our superintendent is driving a Cadillac Escalade, he must be stealing money. Like, okay, we'll just put that aside. But if there might be some things, that we get more specific information, we'll use that, and that's part of our planning/risk assessment process. So one anonymous letter is not necessarily going to trigger an audit. Like I said, we use a compilation of things. We may get 10 or 15 anonymous letters that might have a similar theme or something like that. Again, we'll use that, but it might not necessarily trigger an audit like right then and there. Let's
So
say that.
you're vetting out any complaints received as well, and
That's correct.
you're trying to sort out where there may
Yes,
be a legitimate concern compared to something that is not based on anything.
that's correct. Absolutely. And sometimes we might say to them, hey, you know what? Can you send us some additional information? And a lot of times I'm still waiting for that additional information, because when you put them on a spot, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
And a
So
follow up to that question, would the controller's office, if they were to follow up on it, uh, would you request a name if needed? No name, no response. Like, let's say you got a ghosted email, let's say, at a certain point, would you guys go back and try to ascertain or get a name from the original complaint?
we don't get names from anybody. No, so even if I had a name on there, all that stuff remains anonymous. And again, we're using that information as documentation. And as most board members know, like, we can have conversation at the entrance conference. We might start asking, like, okay, we hear some concerns about A, B, C, and D. Like 9 times out of 10, the board members know who the people are that are at those meetings that are complaining about certain things that we ask for.
Yeah. True, true. Sometimes the nature of the question will, oh
Yeah, the
yeah, we
nature of the
remember
question
that
part, that
person.
right.
Sure.
But yeah,
Okay.
we don't give any names out, though. That's not our thing. Again,
Yep.
we take that information and we use that as part of our risk assessment and planning process.
All right. Speaking of risk assessment.
Yes, thank you very much. So again, we talk about the risk assessment. That again, that's part of our planning. So as I mentioned, that we're going to have access to the employees. First, what we try to do is get it, um, since we have the board president there, we like to ask them questions, what reports they're receiving, how knowledgeable they are with the district, a district operation, the things going on, the specific policies and procedures that you guys know are going on. Again, financial reports from the treasurer. We like to make sure that the board is getting the correct documentation. And what we're trying to do is we usually try to ask probably 3 to 4, board members. We want to make sure that, we have various different, or similar, should I say, answers. But we don't just have one person, because then we talk to the board president and be like, I don't get these things. But then we ask somebody else, like, I get them all the time. So we try to ask, at least 2 or 3 board members
And that's
before.
something new too, Ira. You
Yeah,
didn't really you'd always have conversations with the board president because they are the CFO of the district. But in the past, you didn't really do an interview of board members
right.
to ascertain their understanding of the reporting that they should be getting or that they are receiving, or a comprehension level of the budget process and their financial duties as a fiduciary. This is a fairly new thing that you guys are doing, yes?
Relatively, right, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just talking to one person. So yeah, that is relatively new, and especially with the training that board members are supposed to take, we want to kind of make sure that they are getting that information and training. So as far as risk assessment, going back to that, like we say, a mile wide and an inch deep. So again, like I said, we're asking questions from payroll, purchasing, I mean, I'm thinking of 5 districts, low SAP, retirement, cash receipts and cash disbursements, anything like that. We're kind of asking a lot of general questions, and we're trying to get an idea of, what, based on their answers, this might be an area that we go and go look at. Continue. So as part of our planning process, we're looking at, all these things. We're keeping all these things in mind: the laws and regulations, purposes and goals, efforts, the outcomes, outputs. We're just trying to make sure, number one, especially internal controls, we're just trying to make sure that the controls are legitimate and correct, and everybody's understanding these internal controls. Let's see if there's any type of breakdown there. Continue.
And question for you, you know, we
Yep.
have internal control auditors as part of the mandate that was put in place, the 5-point plan, right? And the internal control auditors are almost functioning on a level similar to yours, but on a regular cycle and reporting and working for the board. Do
Right.
you come in and you look at past audit reports to see what the internal auditors have said, or if there's any items that come up in the management discussion letter from the external auditor? Are these things that you're looking at that you're going to question to see if the internal auditor made a recommendation to say, you need to improve the internal controls over the handling and approval of overtime? Are you looking at those things to see if they were implemented and might be a cited concern on a report?
Absolutely, Bobby. We are looking at things like the internal audit reports. We're looking at the external audit reports because they might have information such as that. So if we see something that might be like a repeat finding, we're like, you know what, maybe this is something that we need to, dig further into. So yeah, that's a great question. But we definitely do look at the internal audit reports because they help. But the one thing, you guys have, auditors all over the place, the claims audit, internal audit, external audit. I mean, it's like compared to what Bob said like from 20 years ago. I mean, it's a totally different story. Like, I mean, you guys, do a heck of a job with everything there now. So it's really difficult to find things because you guys have auditors all over the place though.
Right. And you are now auditing different things too, sometimes not directly related to the business department. Like you may be auditing compliance with, you know, hours for, you know, phys ed hours. I remember was part of an audit series that you guys are looking at because the law says you have to have X number or whatever.
Yes,
And you guys are looking at those type of things. And it drives governance teams crazy, but you're doing a service for the state that you're making sure just as much as internal audit functions and fiduciary responsibilities and control over the business operations have really dramatically improved over the last 20 years because a lot of these things that were put
yep,
in place, then you take it a step further. Again, security and IT, not
correct.
necessarily business department, but you're looking at, again, getting back to the risk assessment areas. From and I don't know if you have this later on in the slides,
Mhm.
from a general standpoint, time frame, from notification to draft report, from a timing standpoint, how many months are we talking? Are we talking years? Are we talking months on
Yeah, we're talking.
average?
Yeah, you know what? On average, I think probably like I could say well, we'll go from start to finish. Probably it could be almost a year from the start of the audit to it was actually being issued. So by the time you guys get a draft report, which we'll talk about later on, it'll probably be about could be like 7 to 8 months, and it all depends on what the type of audit is. Because if we a bigger audit might take longer and stuff like that. God forbid we get Department of Investigation that we have as our liaison between us and the DA's office or something like that came up. We found that could add to it as well. So it all depends though. But like I said, on average,
That's
probably
not that's no longer a root canal. That is a whole
that
different operation. Yeah.
yeah. So after having conversations with everybody, and we say, you know what, like I said, let's say it was purchasing that we had, some concerns with some of the internal controls. That's what we say we kind of narrow our scope area. So you know what, we're going to focus more on bidding and or getting requests for proposals, things like that, quotes. So what we do is we'll usually send or this is not usually, but this is more recently, we're sending an email to the governing board and the ASB and superintendent saying, okay, this is what our scope is, this is what the criteria is going to be, and objective. This way everybody's aware, and this is what we're going to be looking at. What funny, one of our peer reviews, what we found was that's one thing that we're supposed to be doing as far as in the yellow book standards, because when we there was an audit that was thinking not our region but another region where the governing board said, well, we don't agree with their criteria, why don't you use this criteria instead? And there was no indication that we took it into consideration whether it was good or not. So that's part of the reason why we want to, make sure that the board is included in that, and everybody to say, look, this is what our objective is, this is what our criteria is, just to make sure everybody's aware of that.
And just so folks are aware, the yellow book is a standards book from the accounting world. It's not the yellow pages or anything else like that, but
Yeah,
it
that,
is a book that, there are a national set of standards and criteria that you guys have to abide by.
that's our Bible, exactly.
Yeah.
So next thing we start to get into the field work, and again, like we said, which we're looking at what actually is occurring by comparison to what the criteria should be. So what our field work is trying to do, take a look at that. And what we do during our field work, you can go to the next one. While we're collecting all this data, we're making sure that any findings that we have, we're keeping, you know, everybody abreast. So whether it's the ASB or the treasurer, whatever it is, we're trying
And
to
the
keep
ASB
everybody
is
abreast.
Assistant Soup for Business.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, super business, whatever. We want to make sure there's no surprises. We don't want to wait to the end. So and there might be certain things that we didn't understand necessarily that you might clarify for us. That's why we try to keep everybody abreast of the audit throughout the audit. That's our mission. Again, we don't want to have any surprises.
And to be clear, this is not a forensic audit, right? You're coming in and you're
That's
sampling and testing data. Where
that's
forensic
correct.
audit, you're going transaction by transaction. That's not what
That's it.
you guys do.
Right. We don't do a forensic audit. I mean, we do get, of course, a whole lot of, anonymous complaints saying that a forensic audit needs to be done at, such and such school district. But no, we don't do forensic audits per se. No,
Forensic audits would happen if you make a referral over to the DA if there's criminality, or you make a referral to the Attorney General.
that's
Then
correct.
certain aspects will kick in and another entity will come in and do that. That's not what
Yes.
you guys are doing.
That's
And
not what we
that's
do.
not your
Exam, like I
purpose.
said, yep, we will contact our Department of Investigations. We present the information to them. They will contact the DA's office, and maybe a forensic audit would be done as a result of that. Exactly. So after we have our findings, and we finished our testing and everything, and say, okay, this is what our fieldwork has resulted in. We have a conversation with the ASB, superintendent, whoever may be available. We'll sit down with them, say, this is our end of field work conversation. These are our findings. Again, as
It's
it says on
verbal at
there,
this point. It's not a draft report.
it's not a draft report. Nope. It's basically just saying, okay, we found that, 10 out of the 20 vendors that we looked at were not bid over the past, year or something like that, year and a half. We'll sit down with them and, we'll have a conversation because they might say, no, you know what? We have some work papers that, we have some information that disputes or refutes that. We'll take that information in consideration and we'll make changes where necessary. But again, the point is for them, it shouldn't be a surprise by the time they get the report. Now, a lot of times, as you can imagine, it sounds interesting when you're just talking about it, but seeing it in black and white, when that draft comes, is a different story, as you can imagine,
It's always a
right?
surprise. What are you talking about? But this is the opportunity. This is the point in time, and this I think is a real important takeaway for governance teams
Yep.
to be aware of, both boards and business officials and superintendents, that when you get to that point of end of field work and you're having that conversation and it's not the draft report, if the district is in complete disagreement with a finding and they can prove that you are wrong with what you found or misinterpreted or whatever, this is really the opportunity to dispute that so it doesn't make it into the draft report, because
Right.
this is the point in time where a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation
Yeah,
could then change the mind of the field auditors, so
that's
you're not
correct.
you're not fighting it in the draft report.
That's correct. Good point. So as we mentioned earlier, I mean, we're talking about the reporting. So now, after the field work is done, I mean, it's a long process. So the the auditor in charge writes the report. Then the supervisor has to basically take a look at the report, edit it, make sure that the work papers are correct and all the information in the the report is correct. Then the audit manager looks at it and basically will do the same thing. Then it goes to Albany. It goes through an edit process. So an editor takes a look at the report. Then it goes to the director. Director looks at a report, may have questions or something like that. It can go back and forth. Then it goes to our assistant controller. Assistant controller takes a look at the report. So as you can see, we have a lot of eyes that look at this report. So even we'll talk about getting to the exit conference, and changes could be made, and you're so caught up in the audit that there's certain things that may be taken out of a report, or it may change a little bit based on just going through the edit process. It could happen. But again, so that again, by the time that could be a 3 or 4 month process itself, just the editing. That
So
part
this
right there.
this is that uncomfortable period where we just are in that blackout period. As a
Yes.
board member, you know it's coming. You don't know when it's coming,
Right.
and you're anxiously awaiting. Your business official is getting some gray hairs, and your superintendent's a little anxious because we're
Yeah.
not hearing anything. You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes no news is good news, but sometimes no news might be, because the bad news is still coming.
That's correct. That's correct. So I guess you can go to the next one. It might let's see what the next slide
Well,
looks like.
what I would say is, so you guys go through all your review process for the draft
Yes.
audit report. There's so many levels of review on your
Yes.
end prior to the issuance of the draft to the district.
That's correct. That's correct. So when our assistant controller finally approves the draft report for exit, it'll come back to us. The audit team, should I say, the audit team will take a look at it and make sure that, there's no misspellings, things like that, misgrammar, stuff like that. Make sure that the report is in, good enough condition to send out. So we'll send out a PDF version of the draft report. It has draft written across it. It's, it's not a report that should be, released to anybody, because it's still a draft report and it's still subject to be changed. So from the day we send you, so that's the second love email that you guys get from me is a draft report, which Bob was, talking about they uncomfortably waited for so long for. So now it hits your email. So you have 30 days from the day we send it to you guys to respond to our draft report. 30 days.
30
That
days from the date of the email.
from the date of the email, correct. That's correct. 30 days from that day. That email actually also has another link, which is a link to a pamphlet that shows or explains how to respond to our draft reports.
So yelling, screaming, threatening you and your firstborn is probably not an acceptable response.
Well, if that's what you want to do, we can talk about that. But
It's probably not in the pamphlet, though. Gotcha.
we'll respond to that though. So
Gotcha. But it's important, though, to note and
yes,
not to make light of it. Once that email is received, the clock is ticking. You
the
have
clock is
30
ticking.
days for your response, and the district's written response will be part of the report, the final report. Might not change anything in the report, but that's your opportunity to respond to the findings if you
Yes,
take exception with them or if you accept them. And there's plenty of examples with past reports that you can see district responses. So, but
correct.
the clock is ticking both for your response, but talk to us about if there's any corrective actions cited in the report. There is a time frame if you are asking for a corrective action that the district has to act on that within a specified time frame too. Talk about that.
Gotcha. So in between the when the clock starts ticking in that 30-day period, what the audit in charge, the person that you've been dealing with throughout the audit time, they'll contact you. So set up an exit conference. That's the mission. So again, the mission of the exit conference is to say, okay, this is our draft report now. Let's have a discussion about it. And again, it provides an opportunity to clarify any issues and reports. There might be some, again, some wording or some, again, some, we need to clarify. We want to make sure that everything in the report is factually correct. We get nothing out of having anything incorrect in our reports. It's not good for standards, it's not good for us. So that's the purpose of us having this conversation. Now, we may agree to disagree on certain things, but we'll say, are the findings correct? Are we factually correct or not? And if not, tell us why. We'll happily make any changes if necessary to the report based on any documentation that
Right. You have to
that comes
prove
to
it. You
us.
can't just
Get
say it.
proof it.
You have to prove
Right.
it.
Yeah, prove it. That's fine. Again, if you guys come to us, at the exit conference, say, oh, wait a minute, you know what? Look, reading your report, and we went and talked to, the custodian, and they found, information right here. We'll take a look at that and we'll use that and say, we'll take that into consideration. And even some wording changes, we take into consideration as well. Because again, we know, when it goes to the edit process, a lot of things change. So we definitely try to make sure that, everything is expressed as clearly and correctly as possible. So this is the interesting one. So as we said, we have 30 days to respond in writing. So the the way you guys respond to it based on that pamphlet, your response can just say, you know what, thanks, controller's office. We'll see you in 2 years. Or we don't agree with what you're saying, blah, blah, blah. That could be your response letter. Or you can tell us, respond to the draft why we're incorrect in A, B, C, and D. And we may respond to that based on the information. Or we'll make changes. We may say, look, ABC was not correct in the report, and we'll have a response saying the report was changed based on a discussion with school district officials.
Or sometimes you may want to put in, since the time of your audit, we have done A, B, and C, because
Right,
again, keep in mind, this is a public document. So you may want to show that you didn't wait for the corrective action plan ticking going on, that you knew there was a finding and the district acted in a as proactive way as possible.
right,
So your response may be, yes, thank you for pointing that out. And here's what we've done since.
right. And again, and the pamphlet will say your response could actually be the corrective action plan. So it might say recommendation one, make sure the district, complies with General Municipal Law 103. And they'll say, okay, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. The purchasing agent is responsible for that. We're doing A, B, C, D, and it's going into effect as of January 1st, 2024, something like that. So your corrective action plan can be the response. But there's a caveat that I know, because I know a lot of, you board members will probably want to get it out to us and send it to SED at the same time. However, SED requires that your corrective action plan be sent after our report is issued. So you can send us the corrective action plan, but make sure you wait till after the report is issued to send it to this state education department. That's their regulations, not mine.
Don't be like the student in the front of the class and try to get it done before you have to.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So as far as report distribution is concerned, because I know a lot of question is, well, when do we get it and when does the public get it? Let's say if there was on Friday, the 8th of December, if a report is going to be issued to your district, you guys will have it at usually by 9 to 10 a.m. that Friday. Then by lunchtime or after lunchtime, it'll be on our website for public consumption and for them to see. But you guys definitely get it first, and then it's on our website that afternoon.
So you don't leak it to the media ahead of time.
That's
You're not
correct.
trying to do a gotcha, because I will share that,
Hmm.
that first report way back in the day, I remember distinctly getting a phone call from a Newsday reporter as I was traveling down from
Mm,
Albany, and I hadn't even seen the report yet.
right.
Those things aren't taking place anymore.
That's correct. And you know what? And to the point, like that, it has happened where we've seen, some of our draft reports, you know, leaked, and that sometimes is from board members or somebody, somebody that knows somebody on the board or something like that. It does happen, but it's
Right.
definitely not from us. That's
Right.
not our, we do not do that. And again, if it comes to news or somebody asking anything about anything, that goes to our press office. That's it.
Okay. Good to know.
Yes.
And here is the timeline for the corrective action plan itself.
Yeah. So again, the corrective action plan, like I said, it could be part of your response when you send it to us. Or if you just send a regular response saying, you know what, we're doing A, B, C, and D, we'll send you a corrective action plan later on. 90 days after we, issue the report, you guys are expected to have a corrective action plan to us. So 90 days after 12/8, if it was to be issued this Friday. 90 days after that. If not, you'll get a friendly letter from us. It's like an automatic 90-day letter saying, hey, we haven't received your corrective action plan. That way,
And
what's
it'll
going
be
on with that?
very distinct within the report that you are asking for a corrective action plan. You can't the district shouldn't come back and say, well, we didn't know you were looking. It'll be specific when you're saying, listen, this is an area of finding that you need to put in a corrective action plan and report back to us. It'll stand out in the
Exactly.
report. Even for somebody that is not familiar with reports, it'll jump out that other steps have to be taken here.
Yeah, and a word to the wise, make sure if you're responding as your corrective action plan as a response, make sure it says this is our official corrective action plan. They want to make sure you see that so we know and not thinking, oh, they're just responding. We're waiting for a corrective action plan in the future.
Should the board be adopting it as like a resolution, or making it part of the official meeting minutes so it shows that it went to the level of the board, the correction action plan, and
Absolutely.
there's like a public adoption saying here is our cap for the controllers audit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you made me think about something else as well. We take one official response. So there's not going to be a response from the board president, then another one from the superintendent. We take one official response that represents the district as a whole, signed by either the board president and or the superintendent.
It should be signed by both is probably the best
Yeah, that's
practice.
the
Yes.
best, exactly. So as you can see, this audit findings in 2022, we kind of do like the top 4 or 5 themes. This right here, audit findings 2022, definitely covers more than just school districts. So it's going to have villages, fire district, towns, and anything else that we issued in 2022. But as you can see, procurement, financial management, network access controls, which is basically IT, claims auditing are the top ones. But what I can tell you, specific school districts, out of the 182 school districts that we've issued between 2022 and probably the beginning or at the end of last month, the top things that we looked at or themes would be information technology, again, financial management, purchasing, and payroll, and then claims auditing. So
I noticed you bypassed the favorite thing that school districts always love to talk to the controller's office about, the fund balance and the
fund
famous
balance.
4%.
Yes.
Now,
Well,
you guys don't take a position on the law. You're just auditing based on the law.
that's correct. So, and it's funny because the financial management slash fund balance is kind of synonymous, but yes, I mean, we definitely look, we don't, we just make sure that you're complying with the law. If the real property tax law says, it's supposed to be 4%, we're going with the 4%.
And if you're not, know that you're going to get dinged on it and
That's
have an
it.
explanation for your community.
That's correct. That's
Right.
correct. So I think I can, if I have a couple minutes, I'll break down like, what we look at with the IT, specifics if you want.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big topic of conversation
Yeah.
because cybersecurity is on first and foremost everybody's mind, and cybersecurity insurance, et cetera.
That's
So,
correct.
yeah. So let's talk about IT, what you're seeing, and
Yes.
what you anticipate your future reviews will be.
Gotcha. So definitely IT, like I said, that's, that was, top of the line, 47 out of 182 of the, school district audits that we've issued between last year and this year looked at that. So we're looking at, some of the low hanging fruit, like making sure staff is being trained on simple, IT stuff. Disabling unneeded network accounts. That's the big thing that we've been seeing because these unneeded network accounts definitely can result in inappropriate access to the network. And once they get in there, like everybody knows what happened with Suffolk County. Once they're in there, they can take down everything, and they can view personal and private sensitive information. We're looking at user permissions, like we're making sure that a teacher doesn't have access to the financial, software, or the treasurer having access to different roles in the financial software that doesn't have anything to do with what their position is. Or even like, let's say a board member necessarily. For some reason, maybe they might have hooked up somewhere where a board member might have a whole bunch of access to, and the board member might not even know it either,
Right.
right? So that happens. And we're
What
looking
about
at like see
device
if the
management, right? Everybody and their cousin had to purchase Chromebooks for
yeah.
the period of time during the shutdown, and inventory asset control. Is that an area you all are looking at?
We actually have started looking at, you're right, inventory asset control. I think we actually did a statewide audit looking at that recently. A couple of school districts are probably part of that. But a few of us audits that we're actually working on now are definitely looking at, IT asset and, capital asset control. Absolutely. We're definitely looking at that. And going back to the IT reports, what we're also doing is they're confidential letters that we're sending to the board as well. So there might be issues that we looked at, such as like not updated passwords, people going to inappropriate websites,
Mm.
lack of security patches, things like that. But we're reporting that in a confidential letter. So of course, because we don't want the district to be more vulnerable. Somebody looks and say, "Oh wow, look, school district A has bad passwords. Let's go hit that." So we present that to the governing board in a confidential letter. They don't have to respond to that or anything, but at least they
And that
have it.
that won't be part of the public record or anything, because
That's
again, you're trying
correct.
to you don't want to give the pathway for folks to access. So that's a, that's
Absolutely.
that's a, that's a new learning for me, that
Yep.
your findings in the IT area sensitive to the security issues. It's confidential. It'll not be part of the public report.
Right.
but you still need to act on it just as if it
Yes.
was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the public report may say something like sensitive findings were conveyed to district officials in a separate letter or something like that, but that's as far as it goes. Again, it's for you guys to make sure that you guys are definitely, taking corrective action with that because those things are very sensitive and it could pose a problem in the future.
Okay.
And other things like financial condition, again, we talked about the financial management, the fund balance. We talked about that. That is what it is. Purchasing, I've talked about that a few times. The General Municipal Law 103, RFPs, quotes, things like that. Payroll, we're looking at things like monitoring overtime. Make sure leave accrual records are accurate, and people even separation payments, people are getting paid, the amount that they should be. We're looking at things like that, and as far as payroll is concerned. More recently, we've been looking at with the claims auditing because most of the school districts have now appointed a claims auditor,
Right.
but we've been finding recently that the claims auditor is not really doing the work, or their responsibility is not way the law is presented, where they're supposed to be reporting to the governing board. A lot of times they might just report to the ASB or the superintendent, but as a claims auditor, they have taken your responsibility because you were actually the claims auditor at the time until you presented them and gave them that role. So they stepped into your shoes. They're actually supposed to report to you saying, these are the issues that we found. So that's something that we've been seeing more recently.
So, follow-up question on that.
Yep.
Claims auditors should be reporting to the board, and their findings in their reports and their presentation of their reports should be to the board in a public session or an executive session.
That's a good question. I think it can go either way. I mean, that's the information is there, but that's a good question of whether it should be public or private or executive session. I think it's public though, but that I
I
don't know.
That's what my gut tells me. But Ira, I'm going
Yeah.
to have an ask of you as an official question
Yep.
to the controller's office. What is the opinion of the controller's office for the report of the internal claims auditor to the board?
Yep.
Is that a public session issue, which I believe it is,
Yep.
or is that an executive session presentation? But I'm not a legal expert and I
Same.
am not the controller, so we will follow up with that. We'll add that as a
Absolutely.
follow up to our webinar for our attendees, but I think that's a good clarification that we should get.
Sure. Absolutely. And yeah, so pretty much that's it. Like I said, that's my top five right there. So as far as the findings in school districts, that's what we've been seeing.
All right. And you and your office are always there for assistance or questions or concerns.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we appreciate your time, and we are very respectful of our attendees' time. So if you
Yes.
have any questions, we do have a couple minutes left here this evening. You can
Yeah.
post your questions in the discussion area. But Ira, I thank you for your presentation. I thank you for your honest and candid feedback.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
And
Yes.
again, hopefully you don't get a love letter from Ira anytime soon. But I know the takeaways for me is the IT piece. You'll
Yes.
send it in a confidential manner. That's a new learning. The fact that board members, not just the board president, are being interviewed these days, so board
Hmm.
members should be well aware of the financial reports that they should be getting, their input and their processes for oversight of bank recs and the funds and also the budget process. You don't need to be an expert in everything, but basic
No doubt.
fiduciary responsibilities
Yeah.
as outlined in the mandated reporting that some took way back in the day or some might have taken recently. It's always good to brush up on. So,
No question.
all right. I'm
Again, we're
not
always
seeing
available for
any other
technical
questions
assistance.
in the Q&A here. So I think you gave us a pretty good overview. And, we may have you back maybe next year to do a little deeper dive into some of the more detailed findings and
Yeah, I'm
expectations.
here.
But
I'm
if
here.
you could follow up with us on
Yes.
the internal claims audit report and presentation to the board, whether that's a public or exec session, that'll be a good clarification for us.
Indeed.
And
Oh, one last thing too. I have, shameless plug, unclaimed funds. That's
ah,
$18.4 billion out there. People's names are on it. And, when you get that love letter from me, what I try to do is, look up, school district and say, hey, does there any unclaimed funds? So at least when we go to the entrance conference, we're like, hey, look, we have, 4 or 5, unclaimed funds journeys, entries there that you guys could possibly follow up on. So we
yeah.
kind of do that as well. you
Yeah, there
know?
could be money due the district as a refund from a vendor that the check was never cashed or whatever.
Yes.
And here's another little tip for board members. I know you could sign up to the controller's newsletter, and that newsletter will include reports that are being issued as they're being issued. And I know I would always take a look at the audits of other school districts, kind of
Yes.
as a heads up and proactive way of saying, okay, this is what's coming. How are we doing? I would then go back to my ASB and say, hey, here's the findings from the last three reports. How are we, and try to be as proactive as possible.
Indeed. Oh yeah, Bob's. I saw your name up there. I don't know if you ever had an address associated with Jackson Heights, Queens, Plano,
Not me.
Texas, Lloyd
Not
Harbor,
not me.
South
Not me. It's
Hold,
probably $1 million.
Brooklyn.
Trust me.
I
Trust me.
tried.
I account for every nickel and dime. I'm a finance guy at heart. I don't have anything out there. I did find something for my dad once though. So
There you go. There
and
you go.
we were
But
able
yeah,
to
I mean,
get it.
it's usually, it might not be you, but usually there might be somebody that you know, money's out there. Trust me, it's
Yeah, a
out
lot
there.
of money being held out
Yep.
there. All right. Well,
Gotcha.
ladies and gentlemen, once again, we thank you for joining us for
Thank
this
you guys.
workshop, and we hope that it was informative. We will be sending out a survey probably tomorrow sometime. Check your email so you can give us feedback on this event and also suggest other events or suggest other areas that we might want to invite Ira back to present to us on. And Ira, to you and your family, and to all of our attendees and your families, once again, a very happy, healthy holiday season. Enjoy.
Likewise, Bob. Thank you.
Snow flurries tonight on the way home. A little
Crazy,
crazy, a
right?
little early because I'm still stuck in September somewhere. So, but again, we thank you all for joining the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association webinar on controller audits.